Gameranx presents another episode of Before You Buy, the show where we give you some straight-up gameplay and some first impressions of the latest games releasing. As always, I'm Jake Baldino, and today we're talking about the Technomancer. So the Technomancer is the latest RPG from Spiders and Focus Home Interactive. It's technically the follow-up to Mars Warlogs. You don't really need to know that, but that was a game that not many people really seem to enjoy. The Technomancer, however, feels a lot like Spiders' previous efforts, Bound by Flame, which is a game that I didn't totally hate. You may not have heard of it, but if you have, you know exactly what this game is. The Technomancer is basically like, hey, what if Commander Shepard was in the World of Red faction and also he was Darth Maul? So it's basically the Technomancer has nice systems and gameplay elements for RPG fans, but otherwise it's really, really damn lifeless in terms of like the character, story, plot, moments, missions, and just the overall personality. It's not the worst game by any means. It's, somewhat competent, but it is just so dull. So the basic story premise is it's the future. Civilizations and different factions are housed in massive chambers on Mars. There are governments in place and stuff, and there's factions of protectors called Technomancers. This is like an almost religious group who kind of are ripped off of the characters from Too Human, and they've been imbued with special electrical powers thanks to genetic stuff. You play as Zachariah Mancer, because yes, all the Technomancers are actually granted the last name Mancer, and you follow him after his final day of training and his initiation as a Technomancer. So setting out on this adventure, the first thing you'll pick up is that the environments look cool, really cool. There's lots of different influences from Mass Effect to Star Wars to Soviet Russia to Blade Runner, and even lots of Fallout in between. But the problem is that they're so big, they're technically empty. They just feel like slogs to walk through. It's such a chore. The majority of this game is really walking through boring places, talking to boring people. Every once in a while, it kind of feels like a little like KOTOR, but without any of the life to the characters or scenarios or anything. On the flip side though, here developing and rolling a character is actually pretty nice, despite the fact that character creator really leaves a lot to be desired. You can pick from like 5 different faces. There's a really good sense of progression, and the leveling up systems are fairly deep. You dump your points into one of 3 playable class modes. There's the warrior who uses a staff, the rogue who fights with a gun and dagger, and a guardian who uses like this defensive shield and a mace. The cool part is that you get to switch between the 3 of these classes on the fly. Your same character has 3 different modes of fighting, basically. This on-the-fly class switching is, I gotta say, frankly, great. It started in Bound by Flame, and they really developed it a lot more here. It's actually pretty fun. Combat is really like the most unique element of the game. You switch between these 3 classes on the fly while also using your Technomancer abilities. Combat is actually pretty simple though, with lots of dodge, hit, dodge, repeat scenarios. It definitely feels a lot like The Witcher 3's combat. But like I said, it's somewhat fun, and it's actually fairly challenging. It also looks really cool, and it's nicely animated. I don't know if they used motion capture or anything, but it just looks nice. It just feels sloppy sometimes though, with the bad camera and the awfully, painfully dumb AI. But I can't stress that enough. The RPG elements here are the best thing going for this game. Crafting and weapon/armor upgrade systems are nicely done. It feels great, it's easy to grasp, and you actually feel rewarded, and it's easy to see clear visual and statistical benefits to upgrading armor and weapons. But that's really where the good stuff ends. These elements are enough to keep you playing for a while. I certainly did, until I realized that the game really gives you nothing else. It's a lengthy adventure. I think the campaign will take you over 20 hours, especially playing a bunch of side missions. There are a lot of side missions, but not many of them are worth writing home about. But they do get somewhat complex here and there with RPG type stuff. But honestly, you just won't feel much of anything for the world, the story, or the characters, which, that can be fine and excusable for a lot of different style of games, but not for something like a deep RPG that begs you to spend a lot of time getting to know the world and the people. Everything is so generic here, you might actually find yourself falling asleep during the cutscenes. Not only because of the writing and the awful voice acting, but because every single character is forgettable, they look awful, and the lip syncing is really, really bad. Playing these types of games, at least for me, my personal opinion, I need to give some sort of a shit about something, and Technomancer just doesn't hit any of those notes for me. And it's weird too, there was a lot of hype for this game, oddly enough. It's not really a thing for Focus Home Interactive games like this. Maybe it was like the sci-fi RPG premise, the really cool name, or the badass cinematic trailer, but I feel like most people hype for this game, maybe people who don't look too deep into these types of games, they might end up sorely disappointed. I had a lot of people asking me about this game, and I think most of them aren't going to be happy with what they get. But maybe if you really, really like RPGs, you may appreciate some of the gameplay and the systems here. The Technomancer has been getting some really bad reviews, but as an actual video game, it does feel fairly competent. You know, it can be buggy and messy and it doesn't look very great, but like I said, the combat and the systems and some of the RPG stuff is really there. It's just all so lifeless, and it seems like the writers and the developers just didn't give a shit. So maybe if you were a hardcore Western RPG fan, or maybe if you played Bound by Flame and enjoyed that, you know what you're getting with this, then maybe I'd say check this out, maybe at half price. I wouldn't bother going out and getting it tomorrow because I just personally think it won't hit you. It definitely didn't hit me in any particular way. But there is a decent amount of game here, and I have to argue that although this is like a low-budget game and some of it is so craptastic, we need those mid-tier level developers. You know, we have the big AAA games now, and we have the small indie games. We don't really have the in-between. So guys, that's the Technomancer. I tried to give you guys a list of pros and cons and how I personally feel about it. So now you know a little more before you go out and maybe potentially think about buying this thing. But I do want to know in the comments if you got the Technomancer, or if you don't, what do you think about it? How do you feel about it? Is this something that you still want to jump into? And if you did, are you glad or do you regret it? We can talk about it down in the comments, and we can also talk about this game or any other game if you have any questions for me on social media at Jake Baldino, basically anywhere. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, you name it. And you know the deal, if you like these before you buy videos, the best way you can help us out is giving us a thumbs up and clicking that like button. And if this is your first time here, subscribing is a good idea because we put out videos like this every single day. But as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.